Welcome to the Extraordinary Podcast, where we identify God's uncommon work in common life. Recognizing God's work requires intentionality, but articulating it motivates and inspires. Don't forget to subscribe to never miss an episode. In today's episode, I have a conversation with Sandy Butler, where she shares about her life and her passions. That sometimes life doesn't always work out the way you draw it up, but if we're faithful and obedient to Jesus, He can use our life and our passions to impact others for Him. So let's get into the conversation with Sandy. Sandy, thank you for being a guest on our podcast and taking time to share with us today. I appreciate you being here.
Thank you.
As we begin, could you share a little bit about kind of your life growing up, maybe your siblings, church background, setting, those types of things?
Okay. My father was killed in World War II, so I was raised by my grandparents. Very fortunate. He was young. He was only like 18 when he was killed, so that made a lot of difference there. And we had a wonderful life. It was always musical, always. And siblings, I have two twins that are now 55, and I have Julie, and she's Julie. Church background, okay. I did have one sister, and she was deceased 10 years ago, and that was the extent of our family. And the background in churches, I was raised in the First Methodist Church and knew about Jesus then, but that was not a big part of my life at that time. It's kind of where my music started. So I was 12 and asked to play for the church. So I played piano and all the hymnals and anything they asked for, I did the best I could. Then as I got a little bit older, I went over to the Open Bible Church, which is a Pentecostal church. That is where I accepted Jesus, because it was Pentecostal and they bring a lot of that up, and that's just what you do. So that was 56 years ago. And then the music just boomed off. I played anything they asked me to do, weddings, funerals, so that was a big part of that part of my life.
Can we pause for just a moment?
Stop.
You mentioned your dad was killed in action in World War II. Pacific or the?
He was in Okinawa.
Okay.
I was never told a whole lot about that. All I ever saw was the flag and the Purple Heart and the different things like that. Yeah. But he was very young back then.
And so we're recording this shortly after Memorial Day, which is when we remember
so that was nice.
those who've given their lives.
And I think after that, my grandmother, she missed him so, and you would if you lost a child at that age. But we went on and we were happy. And so I had a really good life. Everything went really well.
And so you had a good upbringing, and you've been married for most of your life now. For how many years have you been married?
50 with Bob, my husband now, and a few years before that. And then I had these twins, so I raised them by myself for about 4 years. And while they were born, I had people helping us get to the church, and figured I had to do something then because I had these kids to raise, and I did for myself for about 4 years. And then they were adopted by Bob.
So now, after 50 years of marriage, any marriage has ups and downs and highs and lows. What would you say is the secret to a good marriage?
The secret? Communication, the biggest thing between each other and your children. And number 2, lots of love, just lots of love. I can't give you any other, just communication, lots of love.
Well, 50 years of marriage is quite the accomplishment, and it's something we should not take for granted in today's society.
I know.
So I just thank you for sharing a little bit about that.
Just it's simple, and stay in a church where you're happy.
Now you mentioned your kids. You have twins, and then another daughter, Julie. Could you share a little bit some of the situations that were unique to your parenting that was required, particularly with Julie's situation?
Okay. I understand Julie had a need at a very young age because she would start school. She finished high school. Julie was a pleasant person, and she had learning disabilities. That's what they found out very early. So she was on a baseline of either being retarded or just on the line of learning disabilities, but she did very well. I personally kept her in church. She was at the Open Bible, and I think we came. I'm just not quite sure where all that happened. But there's a lot of ups and downs. It was very stressful because she had to go places you wouldn't want to take your children. And back then, that was quite a while ago, so they didn't have some of the stuff that they have now. But turned out she's a Christian, she's filled with the Holy Spirit, and she truly loves church.
Are there any things that you kind of alluded to? You had to take her to places you wouldn't necessarily want to take your children. Are there any other things that you had to do that people might not realize if they aren't going through that situation?
Anybody in that type of a situation, it's very hard. You have to go to a mental place to get them on a medication of some sort and hope that works. She was, am I talking about Julie now? I don't know. Back then you didn't look for the Christian places, you look for the Christian people in those places. And somebody understands what you're going through, A lot of it I just did on my own and prayed as I went along that I have done the right thing. Julie's been in the right places, and she loves the Lord. That's all I cared about. And she does today.
Kind of what you're speaking to is, regardless of the circumstance, finding the proper support is necessary.
There you go.
And that's extremely difficult.
It was really hard back then because you either put him here or put him there, and if it didn't help, you're out, So, it's just finding the place and the right person to talk to. I basically never had anybody ever to talk to tell me what to do. I had to make the decision. Yeah. It's been really hard.
That's quite the burden that you had to carry.
Oh, yeah. But, I love Julie. She's as silly as I am.
That's quite the accomplishment, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is.
Now, you alluded to a few minutes ago about music. Can you talk about how your passion and love for music developed? How young were you when you started?
Piano or what? I started very early just in the church by being asked. I feel in myself that God gave me the musical talent that I had because by 5 I was already playing and reading music. But you have to develop that as you go along. And I had lessons for like 7 years. What was your question again?
But just about your love for music.
Yeah, and all that ever was church music. That's all I ever had. I never cared about any other outside music, and loved all the concerts with musical people in them, and just loved it, And our family, Grandma's family, they played every instrument you could ever think of. So I was always in music.
So music was part of just your family culture.
There. It started with every instrument you could think of,
Do you play any other instruments besides piano?
I was playing in a cello. I played a cello. Just blessed in that. And then played organ. Whatever you put in front of me, I could play. Not a stringed particularly, like a violin or something.
Now, do you have a favorite song? Or a song that's one of your favorites?
I like them all. There is no favorite song. I could just list a whole book of songs, because I love them. I like songs that have scriptures in them. I like songs that are kind of long.
How do you feel about the more contemporary Christian songs?
A little bit different. It's different, but you have to agree to what goes on in front of you. I like the music in this church. It's wonderful. The guys are getting up there doing. That's what it is today.
I remember this was many years ago. There was I was at a church and preacher was talking about when he was growing up. There was this radical group called the Gaithers that was starting to break into the church, and it was just interesting that at one point the Gaithers were cutting edge to the point of almost controversial. Not that their content was
No, but
unbiblical,
I know what you mean.
but we tend to like our tradition, particularly with music.
But I like anything that's pretty, or you pick out what you like as you go along.
Mm-hmm. Now you have taught piano for many years, correct?
Correct.
Can you share about what that's been like?
I loved the kids that I had. And basically, they were all from just the churches that I was in. I never took too many outside of the church. I never disliked anybody. I totally had a love for the children. And if I saw some musical talent that they had, I tried to say it's working out just fine. You have to give the kids a reason to practice.
Why did you start giving piano lessons?
Probably because I was home with Julie most of the time. Julie had to be around the house, and I had to be there. And I think that was just me. I was always kind of a home person.
So you had some discretionary time, and you said, "How can you use your talents and abilities?"
Yeah, but I never had to ask how to use them. I was always asked. I never, and it was there. I played quite a bit in this church with Dolores, but we had a good time.
So, is there anything about teaching piano that you didn't necessarily like too much?
Maybe when they didn't. They usually came, but if they missed a lesson.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that can be frustrating when you set aside
where
time.
Are you? Yeah. But other than that, no, I liked it all.
Do any of your students still play that you're aware of?
I had one student that took her music. She was a fantastic player, and I believe she's in California, and she's done everything in music. I lost track of that.
So she's playing professionally.
She's done for, And that one, The rest, I don't know. The rest had families and had kids, when you get that age.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's fun to invest in those kids, particularly see them improve and really start to understand concepts. Now you got to hold your hands the right way, you got to sit up, and all those parts, but
intricate things.
Yeah. Now you've indicated that you've played in churches before. What did you enjoy about playing in church?
Just the peace that it gave me. It gave me a lot of peace.
How so?
Well, I played for prayer service, everything, just everything. Everything I asked for, that's what gave me peace. As long as I could play, it gave me peace, and I've been sad a couple of times when it's ended, but then that's the way it's supposed to be.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's a sense of peace.
And with this, you've affirmed that your piano skills, your passions are things that Jesus has given you.
Yes, I believe so.
And you have worked to develop those gifts.
You do.
And
you don't
skills.
Just do it in one day.
Yeah.
Yeah, you keep at it.
You mentioned, I think it was at the Open Bibles when you really became a follower of Jesus. Can you share about when Jesus became serious in your life?
That is so far. I think it was when my twins were born, and I knew I had to do something to raise those kids right. And this is when I was living with my grandmother. She let me keep my twins there. And I had people bring me to church, and there was certain people, and we got there, and that's how we got just into everything, and got saved there. And I don't remember exactly when, but I knew there was a group singing there, and the lady that took me to church with my twins came and said, "Would you like to go down?" And yes. So that's kind of when I did, I don't think a lot of people know exactly, because it's not always bubbly, and,
But one thing that you mentioned that I want to highlight is you said there were people that were helping you get to church.
Oh, yeah, somebody. And yes, they did.
There's something that we need to recognize in the sense of there are people that cared for you,
Oh,
that
yeah.
supported
They
you,
cared.
that
Yes.
showed you were valuable.
Yes.
And I think that's really important because I can't save anybody. You can't save anybody, but you can be Jesus to people.
Yes. And that's about, you don't just walk up to somebody and say, hey, would you like to, you have to see that need in that person and then keep up at it, work at it, pray for them. But you can't say, hey, do you want to accept Jesus today? Because that isn't the way it works.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, the gospel is confrontational, so at some point we either have to choose it or reject it.
Yeah, I know.
But our main objective is how can I be Jesus to somebody?
I know.
And I love the phrase. It's not our job to clean them. We're talking about fish. Like you catch a fish, but it's Jesus' job to clean them.
To do that. Yes.
And sometimes I think we try to do it ourselves instead of
And
letting
you can't
Jesus
do it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've seen that all along.
Now, one of the things that I want to flesh out a little bit is you've used your passions, particularly music, to serve Jesus. In your opinion, why is it important for people to use their passions to serve Jesus?
Because I think you get a self-satisfaction in yourself. As you go down through the years, you think, and I've been going over my life as 80 years now, and seeing all the things that I've done, and I thought, how did I do all that? Because it's practice. You got to practice with everything. You just don't go in and do it, Sometimes things happen that you don't expect to happen, and they do happen, and you just thank you, Jesus, and go home. It's the only place I've ever been is in churches.
I think your life really shows kind of the two sides of it. Jesus gave you the gift of music.
I'm sure of that. I know that.
But there's still the responsibility on your part to fine-tune that talent. So it became a talent. So because you can be gifted but not necessarily talented. But when we recognize our gifts, if we work within those gifts, we'll be more satisfied, more fulfillment.
I know.
We'll be more energized, and almost always will be more effective.
I know.
Right? If you're not a numbers person, Jesus is probably not calling you to serve on the financial team, right?
Right. Never.
But if you are, maybe Jesus is calling you to do that. So if we consider our gifts and how we can use that for Jesus, and particularly when you look back on your life, there were certain risks you took, certain sacrifices you took to get to where you are today. And you said you've reflected on your life for the last your whole life.
I think my time is now to do other things. I serve people. I've always been kind of a servant type person. Isn't that funny? I'll go out and find something and do it, and I think that's my life now. I think my musical, it's hard getting up and down the steps.
Is there any way you enjoy serving? Anything particular? Do you have an example that you could give us?
Well, I don't know.
I'm kind of asking you to brag about yourself, which can be a little
I don't
awkward.
want to. I like to take food to people. If somebody asks me, I like to bring the clothes of the church here. I like to clean up, help them just bag things, that nobody needs to know about.
Well, and part of why I ask that is our gifts, our passions, our the ways we serve Jesus can change throughout our life.
Oh yeah, they do. And when you get older, physical things happen that has to slow you down a little bit.
Yeah, you're not going to be up on the roof fixing the shingles.
I might. If I have somebody get me up there.
but the point is just to recognize how Jesus can use us.
I know. I think of that every day.
Yeah. Well, one of the questions I like to end with every episode is there anything else you would like to share? I'd like to end with an open-ended question in case we forgot something or in case you just had some other insights.
No, I just love this church, and I think you're a fine young pastor. You teach me things I probably would have never thought of. I think that's neat. Never learned a lot about the Old Testament. Was never preached that. It was always other, probably in the New Testament, I guess, but yeah.
Well, I'm not as young as I used to be, but I'll take that as long as I can.
But you're only 35, aren't you?
I'm 36 now.
Oh
so.
my!
I know, getting up there.
That's a grandchild. No, I love this church and I love how it's ran, and I go out and try to tell people, go to everybody I meet, and if they say something nice to me, I'll say, well, where do you go? That's how you just go on.
Well, thank you for being here, and I love how you kind of connected. There were some things in life that weren't always exactly how you drew them up, but you were faithful through those situations.
You just have to be.
And Jesus has been able to use your passions throughout your life to impact others for Him, which is what we're called to do.
Yeah, and that's what I'm doing.
Well, thank you for being a guest on our podcast and sharing. I appreciate you being here today. So thank you, Sandy. Thank you for joining us for this podcast. Be on the lookout for how God does uncommon work in common life. And please subscribe to never miss an episode.